All right. Welcome to the ARLnow Podcast. I'm Lena. We got Dan and Vernon here again. How are y'all doing?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Fine. I don't know. I'm wary of anybody that says good these days. Like you can't be like, "How are you doing?" I'm doing great. I'm like,
I mean, Vernon, you got your Hawaiian shirt on today. I feel like
which if now that we know that this is being posted on YouTube, we have to dress up in costumes for the podcast. Apologies to everybody who saw me just wearing a bathrobe last time. We didn't know.
It'll make for a really exciting holiday or Halloween episode.
oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is only May, but I'll put it on my calendar.
Start thinking now, guys. All right. So we got a couple articles to talk about. We got a house fire in Arlington, some updates on ICE, and then two different transportation stories. So let's talk about the house fire in Arlington. I know, Vernon, you were there, right?
Yeah, that was wild. It's always kind of intense covering fires. I mean, you show up and the whole neighborhood is on lockdown. It's one of the weird things about fires is it's a great way of meeting your neighbors. Like that was going out there, I saw a bunch of people hanging out in the street and they're talking about their day as one of the houses like burns across from them. And I'm like, it's nice to have things that bring the community out together to like hang out in the street. But no, this is a duplex fire over in the Green Valley neighborhood. One of the houses caught on fire. Something happened inside of the house. We don't know too many of the details of it. It's still under investigation. We know there was one man living there with his dog. As far as I know, neither one of them were home or injured in the fire at all. But yeah, it gutted the building. You could see the fire damage was pretty extensive. It is a duplex, so there's also a home next door, which presumably has also suffered some fire damage. I talked to the resident who lived there, and yeah, he was actually at work. His partner was, I believe, out of the country at the time, and he just got a phone call from neighbors saying, "Hey, we went inside, we rescued your dog as the fire was going on,
Oh, that's
but just so you know,
nice.
your house is on fire." So he came back, and it's like, yeah, there it is. That's which is kind of the hard part of having a duplex, right? This came up. We were talking about this in the office. This came up when that house exploded like last year.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, it's a duplex. There's somebody living in the place next door who has no control over who their neighbor is or what happens there. That's a scary thing. Is you
Hmm.
are only as safe in a duplex as your neighbor.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, those things can start, someone just forgot to blow out a candle or they left a hair straightener on, something like that. So you just have like no idea.
Yeah. Or lithium batteries are the other big thing that I know a lot of firefighters have been dealing with recently. To be clear, that's probably not the cause here. We don't know what the cause is here, but for a lot of other
Yeah.
fires, it's been like lithium batteries have started that. So
Yeah, that's
How?
crazy.
I mean, Vernon, you've been here longer than I have. I mean, how common is it for this sort of involved fire to happen here in Arlington? I mean, from the pictures that I was looking at, it looked like pretty dang serious. Is this like something that is like a one-off thing, or is this, relatively common?
we've covered a couple of them in recent weeks. I mean, there was one where we had a shed fire out behind a building, and then a few hours later, there was a big house fire in northern Arlington where it just completely consumed the house. So
Hmm.
it's one of those things where people don't think about it happening because it doesn't happen on the big main streets around like you don't see a lot of this on Wilson Boulevard, but this could be happening 2 blocks off of Wilson Boulevard, and you might never know unless you drive past it. So, like with this one, I didn't know it was happening until you're like pulling up. You're right on the site, and then you look over to your right, and suddenly there's a blazing inferno happening there. So, I think it's more common than people might expect.
Yeah, I mean, it's really wild to me that like in a county as small as Arlington, like a fire could just like go up just like that. I mean, because I'm sure the firefighters were there within minutes. I mean, we got a whole bunch of precincts and stuff like that, but sort of chilling. I mean, just to
Yeah.
see like how much damage can happen that quickly.
Yeah,
One of
it
my
looks
buddies
like
is
it
one of
took
the.
about 45 minutes to put out too.
Oh
That's
yeah, this is
not,
it's rough for sure. That's one of my buddies. Alex is one of the firefighters. That was. I don't think he was there for that particular fire, but that's his precinct. I don't know what you call it, a fire district. But so shout out to Alex if you're listening to the podcast. Support our local firefighters.
all right. Should we get into our next story? CPD contact with ICE jumps as county board considers further policy changes. Dan, you
Yeah,
wrote about this one.
I have been trying to do my best to cover this topic.
Yeah.
Definitely a really sensitive one, especially here in Arlington, but also pretty much everywhere in the country right now. Yeah, it's so basically Arlington County has what's called a trust policy that determines like when our police can and can't get in touch with ICE. And it's pretty restrictive. Not everywhere in the country has this kind of policy. And the Arlington County Board, shortly after Trump got elected, tightened the policy to like ensure that the context in which it can happen are even more limited than they were before. Well, I got in touch with the county to see what the result of that has been, because this has continued to be a hot button topic, as you can imagine, over the last couple months. And what the data that we receive shows is that actually the number of times that ACPD has gotten in touch with ICE has jumped in recent months. So in January and February alone, ACPD contacted ICE, I think 17 times, and that's compared to 18 times in all of 2024. So, and they haven't contacted ICE since then, at least as of like last week. And so, there's just this weird spike in ICE contacts in the first 2 months of this year. And, we're trying to figure out why that is, but, as you can imagine, it's a bit, information is a little bit hard to come by on this one.
I'm sure ACPD is kind of keeping things close to the chest too, which makes it more difficult. So you never really know exactly. I feel like you have to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially with these kinds of arrests where they're not criminal proceedings, a lot of them. So, like, a lot of the documents are not fully accessible to the public, no matter what ACPD does. And yeah, basically what they said, and by way of, trying to give us a little bit more transparency into what's going on, they talked about, there's just more crimes happening in Arlington right now. Like, relatively speaking, the last couple years, crime has been up. And they talk about, certain operations netting like multiple people. But yeah, it is still sort of difficult to discern what exactly is going on there. And as you can imagine, we've got activists here in Arlington who are taking this data and running with it in terms of trying to advance what they want to see happen here.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that you wrote about part of it had to do with gang affiliations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see what they said were possible like clues
Yeah.
as to, because it went from, the special hand signals and tattoos to changes in attitude
Mm-hmm.
and negative contact with school officials.
Sure.
That feels very broad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated topic because, like, I mean, to an extent, if you want your police department to be cracking down on gangs, like, you need to give them, I mean, I think, a lot of people would argue, you need to give them more leeway in terms of, like, leaving a certain amount of discretion here where it's like, yeah, I mean, people aren't just walking around with a t-shirt that says I'm in a gang, like it's a discrete thing. But ultimately, I think it does come down to some questions of like, how much do we trust our police department? Do we trust that our police department is abiding by county policy, or don't we? I mean, certainly the activists do not. They they've for them, criticism of ICE goes hand in hand with criticism of local law enforcement. That's not how everybody sees it at all. That's certainly not how a lot of members of the county board see it. Certainly, who are the ones making these decisions. It's a really tough topic.
I mean,
Yeah, it's so convoluted.
I would also say that to give credit there to the argument that the advocates are making. I mean, we've already seen at the federal level and the national level that as much as you do want to give some leeway to law enforcement on enforcing that, that can absolutely be abused, right? You can absolutely see it this week, stuff that's like, oh, well, this is actually a gang tattoo when it probably isn't. And use that as an excuse to keep somebody incarcerated. That's,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be a check on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just add, what the activists point out is these allegations of gang affiliation are exactly the same allegations that the federal government is using and is causing all kinds of controversy in terms of deporting people who may or may not actually be involved in gangs. This policy of kind of deport first and ask questions later, and it's a question of how much does the county want to be involved or, helping. Ultimately, I mean, a presidential administration that's taking the stances that it is on immigration enforcement.
Yeah.
We're 2 episodes into the podcast trying to avoid controversial topics, and we're like, all right, national immigration debate. Let's do it.
5 minutes. Let's sum it up.
Yeah, let's sum it up. Pros, cons. How do we feel about this? Let's be sure to dive right in. So, here we are. Yeah, everything's local.
Well, it's interesting because this is like a local story, but it's so indicative of things going on across the entire nation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's like not a community in this country that every community in this country, I'm sure, is affected by these sorts of topics. It's especially pressing here in Arlington, where we've just got really huge immigrant populations, and obviously we're also like right next to the federal government. And that's definitely also on the minds of our leaders right now is like how much are they willing to stick their neck out there? And could that actually end up bringing down, more, if they try to like limit the amount that even more limit the amount that ICE is in Arlington, could that mean more ICE is in Arlington just because they tried to, push back there?
I mean,
Yeah,
to
you
that
don't always
point,
know your repercussions.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, Dan, aren't you also covering that, like, the guy who was an immigrant here and is being deported, like, in court over deportation stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, like,
Yeah.
just how the sheer span of different aspects of life in Arlington and people in Arlington that changes at the federal level are affecting. Yeah, we did have a guy in Roslyn who was arrested because of his support for Palestine and have been taken to a detention facility in Texas. And that's one example. I don't think that had to do with cooperation with Arlington police, but yeah, it's a really big deal here in Arlington for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure something that we will continue to report on too. So I'm sure in weeks and months in the future, this will not be a completed topic. I'm sure it will be brought up again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not going away. We'll see what the county board does, but I mean, at the end of the day, also, like, this is not entirely, or by any stretch of the imagination, primarily in the county board's hands. This is a very, very federal issue with very real implications for us here.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to something a little bit lighter. Free Lyft rides coming to DC area for Cinco de Mayo.
If you're listening to it as the podcast, you can't see. I was watching Lena's like face there for the last 2 minutes, trying to figure out, my God, how do we transition from talking about ICE to talking about these Cinco de Mayo celebrations going on in Arlington? So
I did not have a good transition. I couldn't think
you
of
have
anything
to
clever.
just go right into it.
Just pull the flag.
Transition's a bit,
Beautiful
probably
to
a bit
watch there,
tasteless.
like watch the gears turning as I'm watching and
Yeah.
you're like, oh my God, how do we do it? But yeah, to that point, free rides coming for Cinco de Mayo. This is a thing. The Sober Ride program has been a thing for years around the DC area. For any major holiday, you get like St. Patrick's Day, Halloween, Christmas, the big holidays, the major ones, St. Patrick's Day and Halloween. You get It's like a Sober Ride program where you can get a free Lyft ride if you put in a certain code that they post on their website. The idea there is to cut down on people drinking and driving. And so far, it's been incredibly effective over years. We've seen, alcohol-related crashes decline. How much of that's attributable to them is up for discussion, but I think it's certainly played a role in that. So yeah, on Cinco de Mayo, they're going to be running the program again. Should be pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think anything that can help is it's great. I don't think I realized because it's a Monday. So it didn't even occur to me that like Cinco de Mayo is this big because you think of St. Patrick's Day, you think of Halloween. It's like no matter what the day of the week is, people are going to be going out, they're going to be drinking. I guess Cinco de Mayo, I didn't even think about that being quite as big of a deal as those two.
You didn't think about Cinco de Mayo being that big of a deal? You want to drill down more on that one? Let's investigate. It's a podcast with 3 white hosts talking about I didn't know how Cinco de Mayo was a thing. That's
No, but like it's one of those things that you just don't hear about the drinking and driving as much. Like
yeah,
there are
that's
always
true.
big stories on St. Patrick's Day. So I'm glad that, they're considering this as well because
Are
people
you
love
are
their
you
tequila on Cinco
you're
de
saying that
Mayo.
you're not sitting down with your fishbowl of margarita on Cinco de Mayo next next
A fishbowl of nothing. No drinks out of fishbowls past the age of 22.
Fishbowl of margarita is exactly what they had in mind to commemorate the Battle of Puebla in 1862. It's exactly how they're like, one day, people in Clarendon are going to get wasted going to bars, celebrating this victory over the Second French Empire.
Oh my goodness.
All right, Vernon, are you gonna give us your history lesson now? I know
Yeah.
you've
No,
been
that was
itching
just
for
that was
this.
just the Wikipedia pulled up. That was not a.
This is what Cinco de Mayo. This is the true meaning of Cinco de Mayo.
The true, yeah, that's my new Hallmark movie. Is about the true meaning of Cinco de Mayo.
Oh my goodness.
But no, definitely encourage people to celebrate it, though. Go out. There's plenty of great places around Clarendon and around the area in general to go celebrate that. Arlandria also just south of here, so to give a little shout out to the Alexandria people.
Well,
Also
see,
has a
what I
bunch of
love
great
about the
tacos.
sober ride program is like, I mean, that's just like $15. That's just a free $15 Lyft ride. Like, you don't have to prove that like you went to a bar and I mean, you can go wherever you want, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Even if you're like, if you have family that celebrates or something like that and you don't have a car, because there are people in this area that, don't have cars, they rely on Metro and stuff like that. It's a great way to be like, hey, I can get there for free. I can just take an Uber, even if you're not planning on drinking. I think
Yeah,
it's great.
there's so many public safety things that ask the public to do something to enhance their public safety. And I think one of the reasons this is so effective is the program saying, "Look, we will do something for you instead." Like it's taking the impetus off of the people who you know might not want to take that extra step for their own public safety. But here it's saying, "Look, this is a free thing we're giving
Yeah.
you." So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It
definitely an
can't
effective way
hurt,
to do that.
you know?
Right.
Yeah. In other transportation news, more bus routes along Columbia Pike and the Potomac.
Well, could be more
Could
bus
be
routes.
possible.
Yeah,
Proposed, I should say.
proposed. Yeah, yeah. This last story, it's very kind of conceptual right now, but it is. So basically, the idea is that what various agencies hope will happen over the next few years is that there's going to be like more of a push, obviously, to invest in public transit. Is something that Northern Virginia localities in general want more people taking transit, taking buses, bikes, trains, less cars. Is kind of the broad idea that most of our leaders seem to get behind. The idea here is that like the next step in expanding our infrastructure in this way is through bus rapid transit routes. The hope is that like over the next 20 years or something, a whole range of the various transit agencies that are, here in Northern Virginia are going to really invest into this and create this whole like map of new routes that you can take. You hop on a bus, one of these bus rapid transit things, a new bus route, and it'll get you quickly from point A to point B. And it'll be fast and easy, and we'll have no hiccups whatsoever. So anyway, this agency has put together a map of like what they want this to look like, and the idea is that like over the next few years, different agencies can kind of like start to fill out this map, and that's the basic concept here.
Yeah. And then I see that it's oh my goodness, it's connecting with Georgetown, which I don't think I realized that there wasn't a bus route that did that already.
Well, I think there is, or at least there was until recently. Yeah, there is a bus route. The idea is that this will be like a faster bus route. Like bus rapid transit lanes. They're like dedicated bus lanes in a lot of areas, and so the idea is that this is like a faster way to get between places, as opposed to just like kind of, you wait for the bus and it doesn't show up, and then you take it and it takes 20 minutes longer than if you were to drive to a place.
This is
Yeah.
like closer to a metro route up into Georgetown, which is kind of funny because Georgetown famously doesn't have a metro stop. Which, if you ever want to make
Yeah.
a party at Georgetown awkward, go ahead and ask some of the people there why that is. Another little history lesson here. It's because Georgetown was afraid that Metro was going to bring poor people to
Hmm.
Georgetown.
Hmm.
So,
Oh my goodness. That sounds very
bring that one up at a
sounds
party
very
when you're with
Georgetown.
Georgetown. Yeah, exactly.
That sounds, yeah.
I guess a BRT connection to Roslyn is as closest they'll allow to.
Is
Oh
that
my gosh.
is this also why I don't have my damn gondola, Vernon?
Yeah, exactly. They don't want those filthy Arlingtonians coming over. Also, but with gondola and with BRTs, I think one of the things that these programs face as a challenge is what is the ridership actually like? I mean, because we looked a couple years ago at the BRT that runs in, I think it's called Metro Way, that runs down from like Crystal City over to like Potomac Yard and stuff like that. And ridership was not great, which is not something you want to see when you're investing millions of dollars in a transit project.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the argument that's, well, it takes time to build, and you have to build out these programs first, and then people will start to use them more, which I think is legitimate. But at the same time, when you're looking at what's a worthwhile investment and you're looking at other BRT systems that are not doing so hot, I think this sounds like a nice program, but it's got a lot of hurdles coming up. I'll say that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and this is why I'm trying to be cautious in how I talk about this proposal that they have, where it's like, they're hoping it's supposed to be a blueprint. They're hoping that various agencies will together, cobble together the $4 billion that it would take to actually put this thing into action.
Can't even fund Metro.
Right. But I mean, if it is what a lot of local officials are very gung ho on, trying to drive down car use. But yeah, whether or not, I mean, that's the big question with transit in general. It's how much is it going to cost? Where are we going to get the money? And are people actually going to use it? And they do have estimates here on how much this will cost, or on how many people will use it. I mean, sort of remains to be seen.
Our new
Yeah.
transit proposal: give everybody a pony and see how they can. Well, I guess for Lena, it's probably actually a more feasible
I
opportunity,
already got
right?
one.
Already got
I
one.
already got
So
one north.
yeah.
I don't think he's going to be a reliable mode of transportation
Yeah, Lena,
anywhere.
you ever take
Horse
him into the office? You're talking about your commute.
Horse rapid transit lanes.
I took him out once and I almost died. So taking him out on roads, I think
Yeah.
I'm good. I think I'm good. We'll stick to the arena.
Out on
I
those
see.
streets, he really has to hoof it. Yeah.
Har har. I see these the bike stations and scooter stations. When are we just gonna have a stable that you can just put your pony in?
I went on a trail ride and there's actually a bar up in Maryland that has hitching posts.
Really?
Yeah, so a group of us actually trailer to a little park and you go on a trail ride and you get to the bar, you hitch your horse, you have a couple drinks, and then you ride back to the trailers.
When I worked at
Zigzagging that horse the whole way.
Yeah.
when I worked at a gas station in Southern Virginia, there's a time when a guy came in wasted, tried to buy more beer, and I was like, I can't sell this to you. You're clearly intoxicated. You can't drive home with this. And he was like, well, son, found me a loophole. And he pointed over the window. I looked over, and we had a red box outside of our gas station, and he had hitched his horse to the red box and already had 2 crates of Bud Light on the saddle bags in the back
Oh
behind it.
God.
And there's a cop there who arrested him for drunk driving. Yeah, I watched them bring over the trailer that you're supposed to transport cars on for that, and the guy saw the horse and was like, oh, and he walk the horse up onto the trailer and drive very slowly back to the police station.
That horse must be an absolute saint to get on that trailer.
Yeah.
I take it
Oh my
you haven't
gosh.
run into this issue before, Lena.
No, we take actual horse trailers anytime we need to go anywhere.
On Cinco de Mayo, you have a chance to find out. Look for Hitching Post as you're riding drunk through Clarendon.
Yeah, maybe I'll offer Clifford up as a free lift to anybody
Yeah.
that needs them.
You call
I just need to know that you know how to ride a horse first, and then
you call your lift and you go outside and you're waiting outside the bar, and then down the street there's like your horse shows up.
But what happens is I ride him to them, and then they get on, and I just have to lead him all the way back to where they're going.
That is probably more what they had in mind at the Battle of Puebla in 1862.
That's right. They would
More
be very
accurate to the
happy.
times.
Someone could just give them a ride back on a horse.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, it was fun talking about those. Some a little bit more lighthearted than others. I'm sure with some of them, we'll probably talk about a little bit further if there are any updates on the fire and what happened there. And I'm sure we'll talk about more with Arlington and ICE and immigration and all that. So look forward to talking about all that again in the future with y'all.
And learning more about the Battle of Puebla, right? You forgot that one.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
It's definitely
exactly.
going to come up again for more stories this year.
We'll have a full history lesson next time. We'll do some research.
Sounds good.
All right. It was great talking with y'all.
Hey, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.